I can see very clearly my life divided into all these different parts, and usually each part is a different relationship, where I can see that before and during the relationship I was just couldn't see clearly, right? I was a level of unawareness, and then I see after the relationship the awareness was suddenly increased. I could see things that I couldn't see before. And this is especially so on two very difficult relationships that I had. I remember I had a really good relationship, probably in a sense my most successful one, in terms of we just didn't fight and there wasn't as many problems. And this one, I didn't really grow from it. It was quite somewhat peaceful, and I felt this sense of having to leave it, and I didn't know at the time why, but I think part of me knew that I needed to discover more about myself, and that relationship was probably not going to do it. And then I got into a couple of very, very difficult ones where we clashed so much. The whole anxious avoidance stuff. And these were the ones that grew me the most. It was very painful, but this is the only way we grow as humans, right? Pressure and pain. And I see very clearly that all these problems that I had in all the relationships, they weren't really anything except for me. And it's not to dismiss the fact that you have a right to speak up if you don't like something. You know, there's practical things you need to do in a relationship, but emotionally, it was all just me. All these problems that I had with the other person, and stuff you would blame people about, and just put stuff on the other person, and we do it so easily as people. It's easy for us to blame external circumstances. Just look outwards and see that is at fault for how I feel, right? Which is the fundamental error. And I remember the biggest one was the last serious relationship I had, where it was so impossible for us to communicate to each other. It just felt like this impossible problem that could not be solved. And I worked on it so much. I read books. I even consulted professionals. I watched videos. I did practice things of just trying to communicate and make myself seem heard without offending the person, etc., etc. It was very painful and very difficult. And from that, I gained more than I've ever gained. After it, I was just in such a new place of awareness, very, very careful, very aware of how certain energies and character types just don't work with me. And I don't think I was not this careful before. I was not so aware of the triggers and the problems and all that stuff. And then the relationships allowed me to feel things. This is why, I believe if you want to grow as a human, if you have emotional problems, if you have issues with repression, and you're into spirituality, and you're into awakening and all that sort of stuff, non-duality, I say get rid of the books, get rid of the YouTube channels, get rid of everything, and just get yourself into relationships. This for me is it's a mirror. They're not really there. They just show you who you are. Sometimes you can argue with yourself and you think it's them. And it just brings stuff out. I had one relationship where it was very painful, and this was where I discovered that I could cry, and I started to overcome my fear of it. And for some reason, this person, the way she behaved, just triggered some very deep stuff, sort of abandonment wound stuff inside me. And I remember when we finally broke up, I was crying a lot for months, That then eventually the crying turned into stuff about my mother and other things, other relationships. And that was when I realized that I was never in a relationship with this girl. I was in a relationship with my mother. I was just reacting to the stuff that I hadn't grieved because of my repressive childhood. And it's crazy to think, but I think most of our relationships are like that, where we're just in relationships with our parents. We're in relationships with ourselves as our parents. Our parents are stored in our body and we were in relationship with them. We just have this other person who we blame for that. And it's so painful, but it's so powerful. And there is nothing that even comes close to relationships' abilities to show us who we are. And I think that if someone can't get a relationship, then I wouldn't know what to say. I've definitely had times in my life where I've wanted a relationship and I couldn't get it. But it seems like any time that I stop wanting it, it just seems to come. But there are people, I guess, that are so socially awkward and potentially just damaged or just unattractive, maybe in whatever way society considers attractive, personality, financially, physically, whatever it is. And you may not be able to get into a relationship. And I guess if that's the case, then you just got to fix the basics. Because relationships, I guess, are for people who have fixed the basics. Like, don't be addicted to things that make you be antisocial. Like, don't fuck with your dopamine. Don't eat artificial foods. Don't take drugs. Don't drink alcohol. Make friends with normal people. Get a job that helps you socialize. It's easier said than done, and I know how painful this stuff is, but I'm sure if someone who wasn't able to get into a relationship looked at their lives, they could possibly see that there's a lot of things there, basics there, that are not being met. Like, if you're never meeting anyone, then how are you going to get into a relationship type thing? But once the basics have been met and you can get into them, then from there, I think it's the best way to evolve as a human being, by far. There's just no other way, right? I can't see anything better. But that's all I really wanted to say today, guys. So all the best. Cheers.